Hi, everybody. Before we get into tonight's event, I would love to take a second to honor place. The University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Thanks. Andrea, I think it is your turn.
Alrighty. Well, hello, everyone. I'm really excited about tonight, and I'm glad to see that more folks are coming in, and I'm sure more will join us as we begin. I would like to introduce Resmaa Menakem, who is a healer, author, coach, and organizational strategist. He is a longtime therapist and licensed social worker who specializes in the healing of racialized trauma. Resmaa is also the founder of the Cultural Somatic Institute and the originator and key advocate of Somatic Abolitionism, an embodied anti-racist practice of living and culture building. Resmaa is best known as the author of the New York Times bestseller, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, as well as a recent publication titled The Quaking of America, an embodied guide to navigating our nation's upheaval and racial reckoning. I am personally excited to introduce Resmaa because I have been a student of his for the last year in his Somatic Abolitionist training program, and I continue to learn and grow from him and the community that he has built around this work. As a body of culture, an Indigenous body, the work has been incredibly validating, and for the first time, I have felt fully seen and whole in my body. And it's been a life-changing experience, both professionally and personally. And I thank you for your time with us today, Resmaa, and hope this conversation sheds light on racialized trauma and the path to healing. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria, who's going to begin with some questions for you. Thank you, Resmaa.
Before you do that, let me just say this piece. I've been doing this work, in one way or another for over 30 years. And when bodies of culture say to me that they find my work to be helpful to them and that they have an experience of being seen and validated, I don't take that stuff lightly. It is probably one of the highest honors of my work to be. I see my work as kind of like an organic or a emergent intellectual rather than an academic intellectual. And when my people, and to me, an organic intellectual comes from peoplehood. They're steeped in their people. They're more to their people. They're more to something. And so to have you say that to me is really one of the highest honors in terms of the work that I'm doing. So thank you for that, Sydney.
Thank you. And I definitely mean it completely. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. My name is Victoria Gardner, and I'm with the School of Public Health. And once again, welcome to the University of Washington. We're so happy to have you here. As we mentioned, we chose your book, My Grandmother's Hands, as our common book for the University of Washington, for our community circle, because we felt that there was a connection between health and healing of racial trauma and the grief that we were undergoing with COVID and the murder of Black people by police. And we felt that your book had something to offer in all of the turmoil of the last years, but especially the last maybe 3 years or so. We'd love to get to know you a little bit more. And our first question has to do with what brought you into the work of somatic abolitionism and how did you get here? And at the same time, for those of our audience who maybe don't know what somatic abolitionism is, we've mentioned it a couple of times, if you could maybe share with us how you would define that.
Whenever people ask me how did I get into the work, I always start with my mom. My mom told me, she said that I came on the planet leaning into people, and that the way that she said it, it scared, she was like, I showed somebody gonna take you or something like that, because I would let anybody kind of pick me up and stuff like that. And I think I've always been kind of like, I've always liked people, right? I've always kind of like leaned into people and loved being around people and stuff like that. I don't, people energize me. They don't like some people, it tires them. But for me, it doesn't do that, right? It like energizes. I mean, I can get overwhelmed by people too, but I think I get a lot of energy through talking and through interacting, through moving and through doing like. And so I think this work is actually an extension of my purpose on the planet. And so I think my purpose has always been, be with people, be with community, have a sense of well-being that transcends just like my own personal being, but the well-being of kind of creation. And so somatic abolitionism for me is an extension of that. Somatic abolitionism, to me, white body supremacy is an energy. And then when I say energy, I don't mean energy like crystals. I mean energy like Einstein. Einstein said that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right? And so that's the way I think about energy, and that white body supremacy is a thwarting energy. It thwarts emergence. It thwarts possibility, and it dampens what's possible, right? And so and constricts what's possible. And what I believe is that somatic abolitionism, in meaning that we deal with white body supremacy by starting with the body first. Soma's the body, right? And for me, it is really predicated on the idea of we have to begin with the body if we're going to abolish the idea that of white body supremacy. And so the reason why we go about working with the trauma of it is that what we want to do is loosen it, so what's already there that wants to emerge as possibility can begin to emerge as you loosen it. But one of the things we know about trauma is that when you begin to loosen it, right, and you get a certain distance away, the protective pieces slam it back together as protection, right? And so a lot of the work that I do is helping people to get comfortable with creating a container so this process can take place, and that we can begin to not only discern the difference between constriction, but the difference between constriction and resource, and begin to create a container that can hold all of the charge. That's what I mean by somatic abolition.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that definition. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Linda. And I'm hoping that, if this will be a quick one, hopefully. So I'm Filipino, and a lot of times some of what you wrote in the book shows up in my body and resonates with me as well, with regards to how trauma impacts our bodies. Coming from a colonized environment, I share some of that white body supremacy, the impact of that on my culture. How do bodies that don't identify necessarily as Black bodies or white bodies or police bodies or even indigenous bodies in your book, as you wrote in your book, how do bodies that don't quote unquote see themselves in your book, how do we find some healing practices? Or can we find some healing practices?
Absolutely. So let me answer another question first before I get to that one. So you said the term police bodies, right? So one of the things about writing a book is that when you write a book, sometimes you don't know where the holes are at in the way that you understand things until you write it, right? It's like you write, you think, oh man, that's what I think, and then you put it out and you get it on paper and you're like, ooh, that's a bottleneck. That's not right. And that's what I did. And that's what I discovered when I using the term police bodies. There's no such thing as police bodies. There are blue uniforms, right? But there are not blue bodies, right? These people come from the same places that we all come from. And that was the whole. I was trying to illustrate a particular thing and backed into a bottleneck. Okay, so I just want to say, like in my new stuff, I don't talk about police bodies. I talk about police officers who come from the same, who have been impacted and come from the same kind of structure, racialized structure that we all come from. The only difference is that they are seeing that police are the apparatus of coercion for Black, Indigenous, and Asian bodies, right? They are the one, they are always been used as the barrier between those that have and those that have not, right? And particularly as that relates to bodies of culture. So now this helps me set up the answer for the second one. So so you said something, you said I experienced colonization. And so this book is not about identity. I always try and tell people that the book really is, I don't start with identity, because I think when you start with identity, what ends up happening, especially for white folks, white bodies are able to use identity to keep from dealing with racism and white supremacy. So they say, well, I am this particular marginalized or subjugated self, so therefore I'm not really that other thing, right? And that's a confusion of identity. This is why I talk about bodies, right? That in this structure, we live in a structure by which the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies' humanity shall be measured, structurally and philosophically. If you don't understand that one piece, everything else will confuse you, right? So that idea, the idea that the white body is the hierarchy, is in a hierarchy, in a pigmentocracy, is the top and everything else is the deviant. That was a tremendously utilitarian idea. No matter where you went across the world, they use it in China, the five superpowers, right? France, England, Portugal, Spain, and France, England, Portugal, Spain, and the Netherlands, right? Those five superpowers, right, use the idea of race in order to continue to steal land, colonize, and use imperialization, enslave and genocide. Right. So my book was written in a way to where whatever body, if you are in a Filipino body, right, you have experienced colonization. Some of those same processes and apparatuses are in place. Not this is what I say. It wasn't, they didn't colonize the Philippines because of the Philippines got colonized because they were seen as not human compared to in a structure that was predicated on the white body being the only standard of humanness, right? And so those things that happen to your people, in my book, I'm addressing those things, but not from necessarily the Filipino place, but from the body place. Your body was seen as deviant, and those superpowers use the idea and the construct of race to continue to make themselves rich and continue to genocide and enslave your people. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was so even though I couldn't talk about the particular experience of Filipinos or the particular experience of Hawaiians or the particular experience, what I tried to do was as Filipino people would be reading the book, they go, oh, okay, that's how the structure works. And here's how it impacted me. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's such a
Oh,
pleasure to have
Thank
you.
you. That was a
I'm gonna
wonderful question. Thank you for that.
turn it over to our colleague Linda, who's also one of the folks in our community circle.
Yeah, I'm Linda Isham. I'm recently emeritus faculty from the Tacoma campus in the Urban Studies program.
Hey, Linda.
So, you know, I
There we go.
picked up your book when I retired and expected to read it the way I read books. I do a sitting, right?
Right.
And it took me months to get through. I brought up all kinds of emotion and other things. It took a long time. Could you talk a little bit about how Black bodies experience the book and what kind of expectations going in? Tell me more about what happened to me.
Yeah. So the question earlier where I was asked about somatic abolitionism, right? The reason why I wrote the book the way that I wrote it was because I know that race, particularly for Black bodies, right, has a 400-year-old charge to it. I want to pause on that for a second. That the race question in this country and the race question globally has always been a species question first. Let's just let that sit for a second. The term race, the way that Europeans use the term race, they used it as a category for species. When they used to talk about race, they talk about a race of dog, a race of bird, a race of cat, a race. Do you understand what I mean? It was a species, right? And then what they did is when they came face to face with indigenous people, when it came to face with people of Asian descent, when they came face to face with Black people, right? The only concept that they could use to describe that experience was race. Was that this had to be a different species, right? So the idea, and what I tell people is that the idea of race is the oldest secular religion on the face of the earth. Okay. It is literally what people go back to when they don't have an answer for something. Right? And so for me, the idea that we live in a structure by which the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured is an organizing principle that precedes the Constitution, that precedes the Declaration of Independence. If you think that the only organizing principle in this country is those two documents, you're 200 years behind. Right, the most central organizing structure, and this might blow some people away when I say this, the most central organizing structure the most central organizing and enduring structure in America has always been the plantation. The plantation, what I talk about in my new book, the plantation ethos. Right? The organizing structure of one white man who's almost like godlike, bestowing and taking away liberties from everybody, right? That idea is a very long history, right? The idea of a rape culture is like the idea of rape culture, that's plantation culture here, right? And so the way that I'm talking to you now, Linda, the things that I'm saying to you are eliciting something in you somatically as we're talking. There is something landing, something in the chest, in the belly, in the face, like your face just got hardened when you started hearing me say some of that stuff, right? That's the charge of race that has never been dealt with as a collective in this country. And so one of the reasons why I wrote the book is that I wanted to begin to churn that a little bit so we could begin to work with the charge, as opposed to assuming that all we have to do is talk about race and that will cure all of our ills. It doesn't, because we're not accounting for that race has a 400-year-old charge that has not been tended to. So that's why it takes you months to get through the book, is because each time you read something, it elicits something in you somatically, and you have to sit with it, and you have to pause on it, and you have to scribe on it, and you have to push it away, and then you have to look at it from across the room, and then when you get a little bit more room, you bring it back close to you and then nibble a little bit. It is a nibbling. I tell people that my writing is always about a nibbling process, not a gorging process. You can't gorge in my book, right? You have to nibble and then allow things to process so something new can emerge, so you can work with the thwarting of what your body has been through. I mean, let me just say this last piece. Me and you, Linda, without knowing anything else about you, right? Me and you, I would make a guess that me and you come from a people that were legally raped for 250 years. Legally, in order to create a product that was our children. Now, as I'm saying that, notice the charge. Notice the wanting to kind of ball up. Notice the wanting to push. Notice the wanting to fight. Notice the wanting to flee. Notice the wanting to, right, whatever that is, right? Those are the pieces as our community that we have to slow down and begin to hold, because that stuff didn't just happen to us individually, it happened to us communally. So only developing an individual response to the communal horror that got passed down and overrode, and by the time it lands in us, Linda, it lands in us like notions, or what is that thing, or is that real? Like, that's the way it lands in us, right? But the reason why I write the way that I write is that I want us to begin to work and nibble on it. And then when it gets to be too much, back away from it. And then when we get a little bit more room, come back to it.
Thank you. No, I'm attending to time. And I had another question, but I'm gonna hold it, okay, and allow us to open up for
Linda, I think you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So where you just landed. So it's easy. It's really easy to get sucked into the white body supremacy culture. We live it, we breathe it, we drink it, we everything. Try to hide from it. It still affects us, right? And so would you provide some guidance on how we maintain the practice of somatic wellness? Given that we're surrounded by this culture all the time, how do we care for ourselves?
So one of the things, sibling Andrea is in some of the training that I'm doing, and one of the things she hears me say all the time is this piece around pause. When you pause, there is a level of quaking that happens. And many times we think that the way to cure something is by telling our story and completing a narrative. And the narrative is important, but that energy that's fueling the narrative is important too. And many times we don't deal with the energy that's fueling the narrative. And so a lot of what I do in my trainings is stop people and pause them and let them work with that thing that they normally can talk through, drown out, debate over, all of those different things, and just work with what's showing up in this moment, in this time, and then help people begin to play with what I call the cultural somatic toys, right? Self and communal orientation, self and communal grounding, self and communal movement, and self and communal touch. Like, how do you begin to use those four toys, not tools, toys, to help you manage the charge so you can begin to experience resource and joy. Resource and joy is the standard, right? But white body supremacy thwarts it. The reason why we have to work with that thwarting energy is that we want to loosen it so we can begin to discern, the constriction from the resource. And that takes time. It takes time to nibble. It takes time to do that with another body, right? Mm-hmm. You can't just think, oh, I want to be with another body and we're talking about race. You can think that, but when you begin to engage with that, if you haven't created a container that you've developed with each other, what happens is that you'll break apart. Right. And so the healing is what I tell people is the resource. We have to tend to the fields, both the internal field and the external fields, so we can even begin to pick up on what's actually showing up for us. That's why we can't have these cross-cultural conversations about race, because we want to have a cross-cultural conversation about race, and we want there not to be any charge. It is impossible. Right. This is why I push back so heavily on DEI work and implicit bias work and cultural competency work as the cure-all for white body supremacy and racism. It does not. Those particular idioms were developed in order to keep white people comfortable. They weren't developed in order to begin to deal with the charge of race.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome.
So I'm going to turn it over to Arthi.
Hey.
Hi, thank you, Linda. Wow, that was so lovely to hear from you, Resmaa. And you know, what the question that really comes to mind to help us understand is the why. In an academic institution, we're really frequently intellectualizing and engaging in such a highly cognitive level. Would you help us understand why or how is connecting to our bodies so important when it comes to white body supremacy and racial trauma?
You said how. So you said how. Repeat that question. You said how, and then you froze a little bit.
Oh, my apologies.
No, you didn't freeze. It was the internet, so you don't have to apologize.
The question is actually how or why is connecting to our bodies so important when it comes to white body supremacy and racial trauma?
Yeah. So let me say this. The way that I see the work is I see my work as emergent. I see myself being on the shoulders of Fannie Lou Hamer, of Malcolm X, of Martin, right? I see myself as an extension of them, right? And I don't get my knowledge from academia. Right? I have a master's degree, I'm a clinical, so all that different type of stuff. But I'm moored in my people. In academia a lot, the emphasis on debate and cognition can actually be a bypass move to get you out of your body. I want to pause on that for a second. Sometimes academics or academia becoming smart means that we're able to think about things in a way that gets you from one point to the next point, right? And what I've been saying to people is that is just one intelligence. There's a thing that I use in the training that I'm doing that I call Vimbasi, right? It's the 7 intelligences, right? And it's vibes and vibration, right? The body is literally made, the body is an amplifier and a receiver at the same time, right? And that we pick up on vibes. If you're a body of culture, you know how to pick up on vibes in mostly white spaces, right? Even if nobody says anything, you're picking up on something. And what happens a lot of times, that intelligence, I believe, is literally tied to creation. But what happens to most bodies of culture in mostly primarily white institutions is that when that stuff comes up, we think something is wrong with us. We think we're wrong, or we can't, because we don't have the quote unquote cognitive thing to kind of say, oh, that's what's actually happened, right? We're picking up on something in the environment. It's literally what our ancestors used in order to survive the brutality, right? It's literally what our parents used to survive the brutality, right? It's vibes, right? That then the second intelligence is images, thoughts, and cognitions, right? Those images, those dreams, those fleeting movement images that come, right? Shifts in meaning making, behavior and urges, affect and emotionality, sensation and imagination. Those are 7 intelligences. Most of the time in academia, what I just laid out is not given any room. Those intelligences are not honed in academia. The thing that is exalted in academia is cognitive intelligence, as opposed to literally we have all of these other 6 intelligences in this particular structure that's crowded out by our need to only have cognition be the primary of intelligence. So what I tell people, especially bodies of culture in academia, is that you must also hone and cultivate those other intelligences that will probably be short shifted in academia. But if you're going to have enough room for the students that you love and that you care for that are coming through you, you must hone those other ones, because that's what allows them to make it to the next day. That's what allows them not to feel like they're brutalized. That's what allows them not to experience the brutality of academia. Remember, academia is another institution that was also developed in the context of white body supremacy. It wasn't created on planet academia and then transported here, right? It was created in this environment. So white body supremacy and who are the real arbiters of intelligence, that was also woven in and around and through the structure. Your students are experiencing that when they come to the University of Washington. Right. And if we and as bodies of culture, as professors, as TAs, as people, we have to understand that, and we must do our work. So when those students come in, there's room for them in us. Did I answer your question at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no. And yes, you did answer. Thank you.
Okay,
I also, we have questions coming in through the chat from our audience, and I'm going to just share that we are opening up questions from the audience. Please use the Q&A function if you have any questions. Resmaa, the question that came up from our audience is, we want to hear about your new book. Would you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So when you write a book and it becomes a New York Times best-selling book, the first conversation that your publisher has with you is, can you write another one of those? Right? They don't, you may have, well, I want to write this one, and I want to, be avant-garde or whatever. They're like, no, write another one of those, right? And so, I started writing another one of those. I originally started writing a book called, it wasn't exactly the same one, but it was a book going to be called Our Grandchildren's Souls. And it was going to be talking about the legacy and how do you pass down a living embodied anti-racist cultural legacy And so, what do you have to do that? So that's the original book I originally started writing. So we had gotten about halfway through the book, through writing it, and then January 6th happened. And once January 6th happened, one of the things I know about America in particular is that America can develop amnesia in half a second, right? You can be watching something that is so horrible, and America will, and everybody will have this, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And when I say that, I mean mostly white people, because most of the time bodies of culture, when they see this, most like indigenous people, you rarely see an indigenous person go, oh my God, I can't believe that's happening here in America, because they come from a people who were genocided off of their ancestral land. Right? You rarely hear Black people say, oh my God, I never thought that would happen. You rarely hear that, because we come from a people that were raped for 250 years legally. Do you understand what I mean? We have a different understanding of what this whole thing is. And so when I was watching what was happening, me and my wife were watching what was happening on TV on January 6th, and the attempted coup of this country. Think about that, y'all. Just think about that. We had an attempted coup of the United States of America. And if you look at the way we act right now, you wouldn't even think we had an attempted coup. It's business as usual. Is keep moving along. And that's what I knew exactly what was going to happen. So when that happened, and I'm sitting there and I'm seeing the symbols of our Pharaoh past, right? I'm seeing, here's one of the symbols. Here's when you know that America is still has the Pharaohness dripping from its teeth, is when you're watching something and you see the noose show up. When you see the noose show up, that is not just right now. That is right now and symbolic of the Pharaoh history of this country, right? And then I saw the gallows show up. People started erecting the gallows. Those are symbols of our Pharaoh past showing up in real time. Then I saw the swastikas start to show up, and the Auschwitz signs, and then people dressed in indigenous wear and paint. You see what I mean? These are Pharaoh symbols of our past that people co-opt, right? And when I saw that, and then I saw them start to kick out the windows and the doors and go into the Capitol. And these were the Blue Lives Matter crew, beat the hell out of 141 police officers. And I knew as I was watching it, we'll forget about this tomorrow. We'll act like this is nothing. We'll act like it's an episode rather than structural. And so so after all that happened, and then when I hear reports after that, and I see that they went up in there and crapped on the floors and peed over everything. And then I saw pictures of the Black and indigenous and Latinx people having to clean up the feces and all of that different type of stuff, right? And I knew we would forget it. And so I called my agent 4 days later. I called him and I said, hey, man. He said, hey, how you doing? I said, I'm doing all right. I said, I think you're going to be mad at me, though. And he said, why? I said, because I think I'm going to have you go back and tell them that the book that they were going to get is not the book they're going to get. And he goes, Resmaa? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm so glad you said that. He said, man, he said, I've been sitting here thinking how I was going to pick up the phone and call you and talk to you about what we needed to do. And I said, well, he said, so if I talk to them and they say no, what you want to do? I said, they can say whatever they want to say, but this book is going to get written one way or another. And he said, that's all I need to hear. And so luckily he went back to him and it was like, yep, go right ahead, do that piece. And the thing about it is that when I look at what happened on January 6th, one of the things that I know is that white bodies have no collective racial efficacy or agility when it comes to race. They have none because they haven't had to, right? So the shock that happens, the collective white body, does not translate into culture change. And the reason why I wrote the book, The Quaking of America, is that I wanted to create an opportunity for bodies to begin to, like, if you saw what happened on January 6th and you did not go take a self-defense course, you didn't go pick up 1619 and read and get together with other bodies and say, what is this thing that keeps popping up in our culture? The pharaohness on Black bodies directly tied to the plantations, rape culture directly tied to the plantation, the white gaze, G-A-Z-E, directly tied to the white comfort, directly tied, Karenism, directly tied to the plantation, right? All of that different type of stuff. If you saw January 6th, and I tell white people all the time, if you saw January 6th and you did not do something drastic, you didn't learn the lessons of what January 6th was teaching you. That these people don't care if you're white. If your philosophy does not align with their philosophy, they will murder you and your children. And you keep thinking that your whiteness is going to protect you. And that's the problem. You think you don't have to develop a living embodied anti-racist culture. You think when the shots start getting fired, that your whiteness will protect you, and it will not. And so that's why I wrote The Quaking of America.
I'm taking the pause.
I know I'm giving y'all a lot. I know this is a lot. This is the only way. I've been trying to do it another way. This is the only way I know how to do it. So, I know it's a lot, but I really want people to understand that my work, and Andrea can attest to this, I am not my books. I am me, right? I am a full-fledged human being in a Black body, and so the intensity is because this is who I am. This is what I come from. My people. This is one of the things that I say about Black bodies in particular. We don't have post-traumatic stress disorder. Black bodies do not have post-traumatic stress disorder. We have pervasive and persistent traumatic stress disorder. Post would imply that it was over. That is post. We're post that. We're not post. And so my intensity is to, and especially for Black bodies and bodies of culture, is to get us to realize this is not post. This is happening to us every day.
Resmaa, thank you for showing up and really practicing authenticity and showing up as you are. We really appreciate the way you are sharing and what you're sharing with us. It really, you're hitting our hearts.
Thank you, sis. Thank you.
And I want to be mindful of your time and would you have any last words or thoughts as you share all of this with us and where we're at right now before we close out for the evening?
Absolutely. So if people are interested in getting a little bit deeper, I do what I call a Somatic Abolitionist Foundations course. It's just a 2-day thing. Just go to resmaa.com, resmaa.com, and there will be a bunch of pop-ups, and you can begin to learn the basics of what I'm talking about. I strongly encourage people to get my grandmother's hands and go slow. I strongly encourage people to get The Quaking of America and go slow. My books are not books that you read, they're books that you do. And also on resmaa.com, I have workbooks for my grandmother's hand. So if you're in a white body, there's a workbook for white bodies, there's a workbook for bodies of culture, and workbook for Black bodies. And remember, I'm not talking about identity. I'm talking about the hierarchy, the pigmentocracy that was created, and how we begin to work with and through that. So that's all I would say. And the other people, thank you guys. Thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate this. And some of y'all I'll see in Washington, in Seattle and Portland when I get there, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Resmaa. I'm actually going to invite Andrea back to the center to be able to help us close out.
Hey.
Yeah, and what you were talking about being here in person next month is because you're going to be doing your book tour. So if people want to be on the lookout for that, be able to maybe even get to talk to you in person.
Absolutely.
So I just want to thank you. As always, your words of wisdom and presence is deeply appreciated. And I always remind myself that this is an emerging process, right? And as well as you always remind us too. And I think every chance I get to hear you and to have be in these kind of conversations, new wisdom emerges in my body. And so I hope that that experience is shared with maybe some of the viewers here today too.
Absolutely.
So I just, again, want to thank you for holding this space with us. And I know that you are going to be going on your way. And for everybody else and the viewers, if you want to stay for a little bit, we're going to do a breathing exercise to sort of talking about the body, bring us back.
All right, y'all. Thank you, sibling. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Resmaa.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.